Hi everybody. So in today's video we're going to start talking about solving equations. The equations we're going to focus on today are going to require us to have one or two steps to solve them. So let's start by sort of defining what an equation is. An equation always has an equal sign. Now, when we're solving equations, what we do is we use inverse operations. Inverse is basically another word for reverse. So inverse operations are two operations that undo or reverse each other. For example, adding and subtracting are inverse operations because they undo each other. The same thing goes for multiplying and dividing. These are inverse operations because they're opposites. They undo each other. When we are solving equations, we use inverse operations to get the variable by itself. It's very important that at the end of the problem, you want the variable to be isolated or alone. Now, some of you may have seen solving equations before. One thing that I would highly recommend as a structure to help us solve equations is something that I call the T-chart method. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to draw a line through your equals sign. Now, our goal here is going to be to get the x that is on the left side of this equation by itself. So if I look at the left side, I can see that right now there's an x and there's a plus 7. In order to undo or reverse a plus 7, I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides of this line. Think about this line as being like a wall or like an equation hanger. We need these two sides to stay balanced so the hanger or the wall doesn't tip over. Below that minus 7, I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to write down what I get. When I have a positive 7 and a minus 7, those two operations undo each other. So those two numbers would cancel, which means on the left-hand side, the only thing that I would have is my x. Now on the right-hand side, I've got a 4 and a minus 7. A 4 is just a number, and a minus 7 is just a number. So I'm going to combine those by adding or subtracting the like terms. 4 minus 7 gives me negative 3. So my final answer would be that the value of x that satisfies this equation is negative 3. Let's take a look at problem 2. So in problem 2, I would again start by drawing a vertical line through my equals sign. My goal here is going to be to get x by itself. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to need to undo this minus 12. The opposite operation, or the inverse operation of subtraction, is addition. So I would add 12 on both sides of my line here to keep it balanced and to undo the minus 12. Now these two 12s will cancel themselves out, so x will be by itself. On the right side of the equal sign, I'm going to have 3 and 12. 3 plus 12 is 15, so my final answer would be that the value of x that satisfies this equation is 15. Now let's go ahead and take a look at number 3. In problem number 3, we have negative 6x equals 48. Again, I would start by drawing a line through my equal sign. In this problem, instead of adding or subtracting, the operation here, when there's nothing between the number and the x, is multiplication. So when there's no plus or no minus between the negative 6 and the x, I know that the operation is multiplication. In order to undo multiplication, I'm going to divide by negative 6 on both sides of this line. Now when I do that, the negative 6 cancels the negative 6, and I get x equals, and then 48 divided by negative 6 would be negative 8. So the value of x that satisfies this equation would be negative 8. In problem number 4, I would again draw my line through my equal sign. In this problem, I have x divided by 4. The inverse operation for division would be multiplication. So I'm going to multiply by 4 on both sides of this line. Now that means that the 4's are going to cancel each other out. So my answer would be x equals, and then 5 times 4 is 20. In problem number 5, I would draw a line through my equals sign. Again, the invisible operation here is multiplication because there's nothing in between the number, which is negative 2/7, there we go, and the variable, the x. So what I would have to do here to undo multiplication is divide. So I would be dividing by negative 2/7 on both sides of that line. Now on the left-hand side, the negative 2/7 cancels each other out, and so I get x. On the right-hand side, I'm going to do 4 divided by negative 2/7. Now I know a lot of the time we struggle a little bit with dividing by a fraction. So what I'd like to do is show you how to type fractions in on your new calculator so that you're familiar with that. So I'm going to type in 4 divided by, and the division sign is right over here in this gray button. Now in order to type in a fraction, I'm going to hit alpha, which is the green button in the upper left corner, and then y equals. This y equals button brings up the fraction menu. That first option right there, numerator divided by denominator, or n over d, is my fraction button, so I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to type in negative 2 over 7 and hit enter. And I would get negative 14 as my final answer. For problem number 6, this time the variable is on the right-hand side, but that's okay. My goal is still to get this t by itself. So right now there's a t and there's a minus 2. What I'm going to do is add 2 on both sides of the equal sign, and that's going to help these 2's cancel each other out because the opposite or the inverse operation for subtraction is addition. Now that means that on the right side, the t is by itself, and on the left side, 6 plus 2 gives me 8. So my final answer is that t equals 8. On the next page, what we're going to do is look at some equations that involve more than one step for solving. So sometimes when we're solving an equation, it takes more than one step to get the variable isolated. When we are doing this, we always need to undo or reverse the order of operations. So as a review, the order of operations is usually parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction. When we're trying to undo this, we're going to start by undoing the addition and subtraction, then undo the multiplication and division, then deal with the exponents and the parentheses. So we're just going in the opposite order. We're switching this order and going backwards. For example, in problem number 1, I'm going to draw a vertical line through my equal sign. I have an x on the left-hand side that is divided by 2, and there's a plus 5. I need to undo both the plus 5 and the dividing by 2. Now, in order to undo this, I'm going to start by undoing the adding and subtracting. So I'm going to start by subtracting 5 on both sides to make that plus go away. When I do that, the 5's cancel, and on the left-hand side, I have x divided by 2. On the right-hand side, then, I have 11 minus 5, which is 6. Next, I'm going to undo the dividing by 2. In order to undo division, I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. Now, multiplying by 2 is going to cancel these 2's. So I'm going to have x by itself equals, and 6 times 2 is 12. So my final answer here would be that the value of x that satisfies this equation is 12. Now let's take a look at number 2. I'm going to draw my vertical line through my equal sign. And when I look at the variable, which is on the left side, I notice both of these terms have an x. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is combine those like terms. 7x minus 4x would give me 3x equals 21. Now that I simplified the left-hand side of this equation, I can see that in order to get the x by itself, I'm going to need to divide by 3 on both sides of this equation. That means that the 3's are going to cancel on the left, and I'm going to have x equals 21 divided by 3, which is 7. In problem number 3, in order to get the x by itself, so again, I'm going to start with that vertical line, I'm going to need to undo the plus 9 and the multiplying by 5. I'm going to start by subtracting 9 on both sides. I get 5x by itself, because these 9's cancel, equals, and 24 minus 9 would be 15. Now I need to undo 5 times x. The inverse of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides. When I do that, the 5's cancel, and I get x equals 15 divided by 5, which is 3. We're going to do one more problem. We'll do problem number 4. For problem number 4, I'm going to start with my vertical line through my equal sign. In order to get the y by itself, I'm going to need to undo the minus 4 and the multiplying by 4. Since I need to reverse the order of operations, I'm going to start by adding 4, because addition is the inverse of subtraction. So these 4's are going to cancel, and I get 4y equals 16 plus 4, which is 20. Next, I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides in order to get the y by itself. So these 4's are going to cancel, and I get y equals 20 divided by 4, which is 5. So my final answer here would be that the value of y that satisfies this equation is 5. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you for some practice tomorrow.